Hi, my name is Matthew Carnegie, and as always, I say, keep the faith. Today, I'd like to talk to you about doing the next right thing. There's a lot happening in this world. There's a lot of chaos coming in. There's a lot of insecurity, feelings of unsafeness. It can feel like a giant wave is coming in to crush us all, and that unless we toil and plan and work hard all the time without a second of rest or reprieve will be swallowed up. The only way to survive is to figure out how we are going to survive. I think that that's a choice of a way to live. And it's not one that I would recommend. It's a way of living that I've had experience with. How am I going to make things work? How am I going to make my fortune? How am I going to make relationships happen? How am I going to make what I want come out of the world? And I had varying levels of success with this. I don't want you to think I'm just recommending from, I tried to do things and it didn't work, so don't try. I've tried living this way and I've had some extraordinary things happen. I've been able to take things out of the jaws of fate, certain things that I thought that I wanted. And there's also been times in which, despite all the planning that I've done, despite all the machinations and forethought and effort, what I wanted didn't happen. What I'm trying to say is that while that is a way of living, it's a way of living. It's a choice. It's not the only choice that you have. And I'm here to recommend a different choice. Choice is only concerning yourself with doing the next right thing. This is a deep spiritual concept, and I hope it's not too frightening or too confusing of a thing to think about. But what I've found in my experience is that the reason that we plan and make machinations and put all this effort is because we're identifying with the world. And we're identifying with our emotions, and we're identifying with desire and striving and how things happening or obtaining things or certain people regarding us a certain way are really what is going to fulfill us and make us happy. And like I've said, I've found varying levels of success with that. There's also the idea of identifying solely with source or a creator or a higher power. There are many names for this, but I think I'll focus on those three. I don't have any interest in getting religious or political or to ascribe a certain way of being or living, but I think source, creator, higher power are specific enough to carry across the point and yet general enough to leave it completely open. When you start identifying with this power, one of the things that you realize is there's no need to worry about anything else that's going on, because your initial identification was that you were alone, that you had a limited form of power, and that the only way that you were going to get what you needed was through your effort. And yet when you start identifying with source and, the higher power, what you find out is that you don't have to worry or do anything except the next right thing that's right there in front of you. and everything else will take care of itself. If you've read the biblical literature, there's a comment about this. I think it's in the book of Matthew. The idea of taking no thought for tomorrow, because our Creator wants us to be living a life that is one that is fulfilling. Not necessarily always happy, but in the final estimation, meaningful and complete. In the sense that when we reach the end of our lives, because, we're all going to die, and that's okay. But when we reach the end of our lives, we don't look back on with regret or what if, or I wish I could have done this one more thing, or there was something else left undone. And instead, when we are at the time of our death, we can say, yeah, that was everything that I would do or needed to be done. I feel perfectly comfortable leaving now, for I've done my part. The way this is achieved is by leaving all of the nonsense and craziness and problems of the world up to this higher power. I've often felt it's sort of ridiculous to contend with a lot of the problems of the world. I just got here, I'm under the age of 30. And there are problems, the reverberations of hundreds of years of problems that I'm experiencing now that were with people and events that had absolutely nothing to do with me, or completely outside of my purview. And yet I'm still feeling the effects of them. This could be very disconcerting if I was identifying with the world and I was identifying myself as alone and on my own. And I had to figure out how I was going to contend with these problems, how I was going to protect myself, and how I was going to continue to extract out a sense of meaning and sense of happiness. Instead, what I'm doing today is I'm realizing that those problems aren't any of my business. I don't need to worry about them because they're just not my responsibility. They're not something that I'm here to contend with. And I think one of the first objections, the main objection certainly that arises is, well, it still affects me. But I think if you sit with that feeling and you look deeper, one of the things that you'll find is that it doesn't actually affect you. It just affects your plans, your desire for the world to be. I think that we come into this world and we wish that it's perfect. We wish that we don't have to go through pain or loss or misery. We don't have to be victimized or minimized or vilified or, so on and so forth. And yet we are. And it only becomes a problem when you're hoping that doesn't happen. That's not the case, that you don't have to go through that. But when you start identifying with a source and realize that you don't have to live in a world in any other way other than the way that it is, there's a deep sense of peace, relief, and equanimity that follows. Because you're no longer seeing how the world is damaging your desire for how it should be. And instead, you're just understanding that there's a lot of silly, stupid people doing silly, stupid things. And you don't need to bother with the effects because it's unimportant and doesn't affect you in the extent of your responsibility, which is to just do the next right thing. And in doing the next right thing, I find that the world opens up to you because you're feeling content and walking the right path. And so the fear and the stress and the worry that would normally be a part of you starts to melt away. And so it leaves you open for feelings of contentment and joy and gratitude to enter your life. So I would highly recommend, if you're like me and you used to be living in a state of, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to make this work? To instead switch yourself to a state of, how can I let go? Not necessarily not care, but let go and not identify with problems, and instead be content in doing exclusively your work and not having to do anything else. I hope this made sense. I think there are many layers to what I'm saying, some of them shallow and some of them very deep. And sometimes those can get confused. But essentially, if you can let go of the need for the world to be a certain way, then you find that you have complete power over the world and everything else. Because where once you were driven by what the world was doing, you were reactive. Instead, you demonstrate that you will be you without any need for someone else to confirm it or the world to validate it. As always, my name is Matthew Carnegie, and I say, keep the faith.